I've been thinking about a moral scenario, so let's populate it, let's personify it, let's put some people into it. Imagine a scientist, a hard scientist, a chemist or a geologist, physicist, something like that, someone who works in the hard sciences. And let's give him a 16-year-old daughter. Want to talk about a guy who understands everything at work and maybe not much of anything at home. But his daughter is newly sprouted into the world of womanhood, and though she's been a scientist's daughter until now, a straight-A student, advanced placement, everything, international baccalaureate, a wonderful resume, headed toward a wonderful collegiate career, except she's newly sprouted into womanhood, and she's got a boyfriend. The older brother of her lab partner. And he was kind of a hellion when he was younger, but those days are behind him. He's not like that anymore. He's not really in a band, but he hangs out with the band. And he sort of dresses like a drug dealer, but he just likes to hang out with those guys. He's not one of them. It's so tough to fit in when you're a teenager. He doesn't really have a son with a 23-year-old barmaid because nobody's forced him to do a paternity test yet, so that doesn't count. Hi, Dad. How's your day going? And as far as you know, there's nothing really outrageously wrong except that your daughter has a bunch of new friends who phone a lot. All of them seem to drive, and none of them ever come to knock on the door. They just honk out front. She seems to be doing okay in her classes, but she dropped AP Calculus, and that was a matter of concern. And really, practically speaking, the greater concern is just subtle differences about her. She wears a lot more makeup now, especially a lot more eye makeup, and when she comes home, she always comes home too late. She's always after curfew, and she always smells like cigarette smoke. Maybe she's not smoking, but how long before she is? So here's my question for this scientist, this master of the universe at work. He understands everything there is to understand about things that are completely predictable to infinite mathematical precision. He understands it better than anyone, but he comes home and his daughter is dating a jackass, and she may well be setting herself on a trajectory of lifelong jackassery. And my question is, to whom does this scientist turn for advice, for answers, or even just for consolation? Welcome to the Church of Splendor. My name is Greg Swann. I will be your televangelist today. My televangelical life got a great big boost this week from my friend Anthony Johnson of the 21 Convention. Anthony has posted 3 movies featuring me, 2 of them that look really good, unlike this movie. One of them, I think he calls it the physical expression of emotion or something like that. I call it Why Your Face Is Going to Freeze Like That. And it's interesting to think about the scientist's daughter when you're thinking about why your face is going to freeze like that. She had, one aspect, one character, one personality, one manner until she met this guy, and then in a very short span of time, those things started to change, and her appearance started to change, and her attitudes. Her appearance is changing as a reflection of her attitudes. Her ideas are changing, and her appearance is changing in consequence. And if she sees this guy, if she runs with this crowd, if she takes up smoking, if she becomes a creature of the night instead of a continuous inhabitant of the library, if she changes those things about her, she will make a radical change in her appearance over time. And the argument in the movie is that the emotions that you hold most often will write themselves on the lines of your face. And I consider this completely non-controversial. This is stone obvious to me. I live in the real world. I live in the real world of fathers who have daughters, and I don't need some kind of academic study to tell me what happens to people over time. I've been watching my entire life what happens to people over time. But in the reaction, the counter-reaction to this movie, a whole bunch of scientism types, scientism-mysticism types, I don't know what to call them, the scientific equivalent of the intolerant Bible thumper in religion, posturing display behavior that basically consists of appeals to authority or appeals to ridicule. If your entire argument consists of scoffing and sneering, you don't have an argument. You don't have anything to say. And I don't have any huge respect for science and academia as a path to truth. Certainly in geology or in chemistry or in much of physics, not physics at the extremes, but the middle of the bell curve in physics, there's a great deal of worth, benefit to be derived from science and the scientific method. But as soon as we personify the scientist and his daughter, we discover that science really has nothing whatever to say about this problem, has no advice to offer whatever. And we're living with the wreckage of entrusting science and academia with these kind of problems for 100 years, 150 years. Nietzsche said God is dead, and by that he didn't mean that there had once been a omnipotent universe creator who had since expired. What he meant was that religion is no longer useful for motivating most people's human behavior. They do not respect religion as a guide to their behavior, and the people who drew that conclusion invested all of their confidence in science instead, and science has been a complete disaster at this. There are reasons for this, and I don't have any huge use for religion because I think it's epistemologically invalid. It's an invalid way of arriving at the truth, but I will give religion credit for being much better at guiding actual real-life human behavior than the academy has been, than science has been. Religion is much better that the scientist goes to work and tells his own lab partner about his problem, and his lab partner says, "Oh, you should have raised your kid in the church." And it turns out that when you run into people who have really great marriages, you will find a high degree of overlap with religion. If you find people who have really great families, really happy, healthy, productive kids who are really going to amount to something someday, there's going to be a high degree of correlation with religion. I'm not saying that it's a necessary consequence, but one of the ways that people have arrived at successfully managing the difficulties of family life is through religion. And so, as much as I dismiss it as a method for arriving at truth, nevertheless, I do credit it for having discovered very valuable rules of thumb for successfully managing the job of human life, whereas science has been a complete disaster at this, and no better evidence than the 150 years or so that Western Europe and then later the United States has given science the authority to dictate how human beings should behave, and the results have been disastrous. They've been completely disastrous, and this is most obvious among the young. Children grow up, almost all children grow up in broken families of one sort or another. They kind of grow up to be broken people. They really don't have any good guidance when they're young about how to manage the problem of being alive as a human being. They land in adulthood kind of a sink or swim, and not sink or swim when you're 3 or 5 to actually learn how to swim, but sink or swim to be thrown into the world with no real idea of how to manage it and what to do about it. To scoff and scorn as an argument is persuasively invalid. It's useless. It's the fallacy ad hominem. It's the fallacy of well poisoning, the fallacy of provision, the appeal to the mob. All kinds of logical fallacies that you will find in this, and it's really not an argument at all. It's all just display behavior. It's the ASCII equivalent, the internet equivalent of a chimpanzee beating on its chest and going, "Woo, woo, 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 woo." That's all it is. It's really just display behavior. Because you're not going to dismiss an argument like mine by quibbling at the margins. It's completely useless. But the argument itself is potent and powerful and should be very scary to young people. Young people care a great deal about their appearance, about their personal beauty. And let me tell you that the big threats to your beauty are cigarettes, alcohol, bad food, and lies. And of those four, the only one you can never recover from is lies. That if you habituate lies that you tell to other people, but especially lies that you tell to yourself, if you habituate those lies when you're young, they will write themselves on your face, and you will be a very, very ugly old person. You will expose the ugliness in your soul on your skin. It's the reverse of the picture of Dorian Gray, that instead of hiding your ugliness in a painting in the closet, you're going to be exposing it day by day on your face. You will write the history of your failures, of your corruptions, of your betrayals on your face. Don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. Another film that Anthony put up was one called The Men of the 21 Convention, and this is a clip from both of these that I've mentioned so far, are clips from an interview that I did with Anthony last August in Orlando, and he's releasing these clips now, and eventually he'll release the entire interview. But I really like this clip because it was me rhapsodizing about the young men who attend the 21 Convention's events. And I just think they're remarkable. I really was deeply impressed with them. I'm really inspired by them, and I want that experience more. I want to have that experience more. But what I think is exceptional about them is that whatever their circumstances are, whatever they're rising out of, whatever their family life was like at home, maybe they were lucky enough to have, you know, mom, dad, intact family the whole time they were growing up, or maybe it was, you know, fighting and turmoil and rancor and all that ugliness. Maybe there was a divorce, maybe there were stepdads coming and going for years, or stepmoms coming and going for years. All of these things wreak chaos on young lives. These are all chaotic to young people. It's exactly the opposite of what they need. They need the most stable, predictable, unchangeable environment you can achieve. And on the advice of very bad scientists, the scientists who live in the world of predictable physics should shun all the rest, because everything of science that is not independently verifiable, and I mean immediately independently verifiable. Look at this. You can see it yourself. Anything that calls itself science that can't do that is just tendentious lies. It's lies buttressed by statistics. I will prove this to you if you're rebelling against this notion. I will prove it to you right now. Have you ever told a lie on a questionnaire? Some dipshit academic puts some tendentious questionnaire in front of you. In the first place, it doesn't make any sense. The choices don't apply to you in any way, whatever. But in the second place, you know it's just bullshit, and you want to get it out of the way. And so, check. Here, I'm all done. Did you say that there was a stipend for filling out this questionnaire? I'd like to have my $2.50 in quarters. Have you ever lied on a questionnaire? So has everyone else. And what you know about all of testimony-based science, all science based on the tabulation of questionnaires, what you know about that now is that all of the data is useless. Completely suspect, because you have no way of arriving at the veracity of that data. And the only way that you could actually verify it would be by independently checking up on it, which would be hideously expensive, and then no one would fund the enterprise because the objective is strictly to arrive at some foregone conclusion anyway, that the so-called academic has some hobby horse that he wants to ride in public, so he devises a questionnaire that will produce the results that will enable him to release the press release that says, "Dancing bears are just like us. See, I proved it with a questionnaire." This is useless. This is epistemologically useless. The part of science that is fundamentally most useful is only useful in tautological ways. I mean, that our brilliant chemist is truly a brilliant man and does amazing work, but his amazing work consists of drawing inferences that are tautologically obvious, that are obvious on their face. I mean, he has to dig deep to get them. He has to quarry for them. But the nature of a fact is true whether you know it or not. And if somebody has to tell you in some great, big, astounding headline that something is true, it almost certainly isn't true, that it's a lie. And science made a huge mistake by letting these charlatans adopt the name of science for what they do. It should throw them all out right now, that at best the social sciences are statistically tabulated anecdotes, and at worst they're statistically tabulated lies. Fundamentally useless. But these guys, the men of the 21 Convention, are all, you know, kind of the victims of that scientist mysticism that has overtaken not just academia, but academia, government, and even religion. And it's this useless bullshit language is everywhere. And yet those men are managing to rise above it. They are taking it in their stride and working beyond it. And I just really admired them. I admired them no end. And of course, they're exactly the guys that the scientist's daughter, if she goes the full tramp, if she becomes the 23-year-old barmaid with bastard of unknown patrimony, that girl will not pay any attention to this kind of guy. She will never notice him. He will be a nerd. He will be a geek. He will be less than nothing in her eyes, that she will be so busy chasing after useless, functionally useless, productively useless, morally useless bad boys. Thus to breed more bad boys. And finally, I made a movie called The Joy of Chastity, and I hope everybody who watched that movie had a really wonderful weekend. This came out on Friday. It's a perfect day for this movie to come out. It literally is about chastity. It's about chastity and masturbation. And if you're the scientist that we started this story with, that would be one of my answers to you. That may not be my full answer, but one of my answers to you is get this movie in front of your daughter. If you can't stand to watch it with her, get it in front of her and have her watch it. But parents of America, you have the happy duty of talking to your children about chastity and masturbation. That's going to be a lot of fun for you. But it's an interesting movie. I would encourage you to watch it by yourself if you're a parent, or definitely if you're a young person. And if you're a young person who hasn't yet had sex, an ideal time to watch it. And it's funny to think about me making an argument for chastity, but what I end up with is a completely viable, I think, impenetrable, insuperable, inarguable, secular argument for chastity. I have made the case for no nookie. But what we're actually doing in that movie is we're talking about a brand new moral philosophy. And it's a real interesting topic to use to do that, because it's easy to see how indiscriminate sexual behavior can be self-destructive. And that's what this moral philosophy is about understanding ethics from the inside out, understanding ethics from the actor's point. We've been talking week after week after week about transactions and trying to understand the transaction from the buyer's point of view. We always want to understand the seller's argument because we're always the seller. We're always trying to persuade other people to do what we want. We're always trying to sell them something. But you can only understand the transaction from the buyer's point of view, and you can really only understand ethics, morality, from the actor's point of view, because the actor is the thing that is being acted. Every action that you take is taken first by yourself upon yourself. The self is the mental image that you have of your idea, both your life the way it is right now and the way that you idealize it, the way that you would have it be if it were perfect. And every choice that you make, whether it is physically observable or strictly introspective, strictly inside your mind, every choice that you make is made upon yourself, by yourself. You're acting upon yourself first, primarily, always acting upon yourself, no matter what else you're doing. And the actions that you take upon yourself will have consequences. They will have consequences for your life. And that's what we're talking about with respect to the joy of chastity, but that's what I'm talking about with respect to everything. I can pull the lens way back and take in all of human life on the basis of that one question. Is this self-constructive or self-destructive? After I have made this choice, will I be a better person or a worse person? Will I be a happier person or a more morose person, a more depressed person? Will I be a more productive person, or will I be even more deeply mired in my poverty of inaction? When I have made this choice, will I feel admiration for myself? Will I feel admiration for myself while I'm watching myself make the choice, while I'm acting upon it? And will I feel admiration for myself from now on, or will I feel contempt for myself? Even if I steel myself and go through with it now, will I feel contempt for myself later? Will this be an enduring unhappy memory? Will it be a regret? These are happy subjects to consider, aren't they? I talk about things that nobody wants to talk about. Bring out subjects that nobody ever wants to consider. If you are that scientist, you will think all day and half the night about your work, about some knotty problem that you're having to solve in order to make some new factual statement about your field of study. But the things that matter most in your life, your own health, your own personal interior health, your own mental health, your own happiness, your marriage, your family, your home life, these are things that you would rather not think about at all. If science isn't concerned with the stuff that nobody wants to think about, then science is as useless as religion. This is, I think, proof of the supremacy of philosophy. Science has wanted to take the lead in the life of the mind for these 150 years or even longer than that. But this is where science proves its inadequacy. It has no answers whatever for solving these kind of problems. And I want to stress that I'm not here to judge you, and I'm not here to scold you, and I'm not here to hold you to account, and I'm not here to make you feel worse about yourself. None of the above. For one thing, I want you to feel like a giant. I want you to grow larger in everything that you do. And the way that you'll do that is by choosing admirably. I mean, this is a very, very, very simple praxis that takes forever to explain because you spent your whole life been lied to about it. Nobody ever wants to talk about what's important, and in consequence, nobody really can talk about what's important. You go through things that seem to me to be painfully obvious in order to discuss the simplest things. But I want for you to be enormous. I want you to feel enormous. If you go to selfadoration.com and read the essay Psalm, it's in the bar at the top. We're going through that in particular, just rhapsodizing what you can be, what you can make of your life. And I love it. I love it beyond anything. I love the human mind, and I love what it can do. love to see you making more of your mind, making more of your life. But at the same time, I don't want to imply that I'm some kind of moral paragon. I am not. A failed and fractured and flawed man. I have made no end of mistakes, and if I have anything useful to say about anything, it almost certainly comes about as a result of my having reflected upon the terrible mistakes that I've made in my life and having learned to do better. And that really is kind of a brief summation of the moral philosophy that we're talking about anyway. The theme of today's homily is the joy of redemption, and we're going to talk about how you can get it and how you can get it in a secular way, in a way that doesn't require religion, doesn't require mumbo-jumbo, doesn't require you to affect beliefs in things that are not clearly and obviously evident. I am strictly an ontologist. I believe that your first-hand evidence of the universe is the best evidence you have. I don't care how many documents, how many studies, how many big piles of paper, how many clipboards, how many pencils with their erasers nibbled away by worry over the quality of the data. I don't care about any of that crap because you can't trust it. It's not reliable. It's certainly not more reliable than your own sense experience. And the fact of the matter is, science isn't paying any attention to the things that matter anyway. So you're going to have to fall back on your own senses. There's nobody who's going to be able to tell you anything because nobody wants to talk about this stuff except me. But I don't want to leave you with the impression that I am scolding you into doing things that I don't do. To the contrary, I'm talking about things that I do now as a result of having learned better, having learned from my mistakes. If I can save you the time of those mistakes, I'm glad to do it, but practically speaking, I really can't. You're going to have to make them anyway. And when you do, I want you to think about me and think about what I'm saying to you now. Nobody thinks about changing until they discover a need for change, and typically they discover a need for change falling flat on their faces. I don't want you to fall flat on your face. I don't want you to suffer. I don't want you to hurt. To the contrary, I want you to grow and prosper and thrive. But whatever way I have of getting through to you, I do want to get through to you. And if you have to fall flat on your face before you're willing to listen to me, then dang, sorry. I wish it were otherwise. If you're wiser than that and you don't have to, then do listen to me. If you have invented some magic quibble or category that you think you can use to reject me, I want to tell you that you're wrong. I used to think in terms of writing little mini essays about reasons to reject me, and I could name a dozen of them easily, maybe more than that. Easy reading, easy action, step-by-step, paint-by-numbers ways of rejecting a philosophical argument that you don't want to hear. But there are none of these quibbles that are actually useful. If I took them on, I could shoot them down one by one, but I don't want to. It's not necessary or fruitful. It's certainly of no benefit to me, and that's why the 3 rules of the Church of Splendor exist. I don't go to your church. I am not arguing with you, and don't be an asshole. And don't be an asshole refers to me. I don't want to be an asshole toward you in disagreeing with you, but if you think that being disagreeable toward me proves anything other than that you are a disagreeable person, you are mistaken. That if you intend to disprove the argument I'm making, you have to start at the beginning, which is that ethics starts from the inside out. Epistemology starts from the inside out. Metaphysics, practically speaking, starts from the inside out. And if you're going to take me on, you have to take me on there. And if you are, then I'm going to demonstrate again and again and again why the contrary to my position is anegoic and egoistic, is anti-human life, as opposed to the proper trajectory by which a human life should be directed. In the comments to some of the movies, one of the movies at Anthony's Place, somebody said, "Oh, Rick Swann, you're so full of great big ideas, but I don't see any practical advice." And I thought it was funny. My response was, choose admirably. 2 words, choose admirably. This is my practical advice. But I will amend that and give it to you in 7 words, 10 syllables. Iambic pentameter. Choose admirably. Love yourself and thrive. Choose admirably, love yourself, and thrive. And obviously, I can give a lot more practical, tactical advice about individual activities that you might be engaged in, but frankly, those 7 words will answer everything, every dilemma that you might face if you just take the time to work it through. What is the admirable choice? Which choice will lead me to greater admiration for myself now and in the future? Love yourself is just the objective that you have in mind, that if you think in terms of cherishing and maintaining that image that you have of yourself, if you think of perfecting your character and your behavior to more closely match that idealized image that you have of yourself, in consequence, you will thrive. I love the word thriving because it implies conscious intent, that animals can flourish, but only humans can thrive. You thrive by using your mind appropriately, by living a life that is appropriate to a human being. And the interesting thing about living as a human being is that much of your personal identity, who you say you are, what you think about yourself, what you think about who you are and how you behave, much of that comes about through self-observation, by observing yourself in the real world, by observing your real actions. And what that means is that you can change your view of your life in here by changing the life that you are viewing out here. If you change your habits, you will change everything in time. It won't happen instantly. It won't happen. It's not at the strength of making a New Year's resolution. You say you made a New Year's resolution, I've changed directions with my life. Well, no, what you did was you turned around and faced a different direction, and then you stood there for a while, and then you turned back to the way that you were facing in the first place. This is what fails in a New Year's resolution. Is you failed to do what you said you were going to do. You changed your ideas temporarily, and you didn't change your behavior at all. And the important thing is to change your behavior, because we are what we do. We are what we do, not what we say we do, not what we say we're doing, not what we say about what we're doing. We are what we actually do, and your mind reacts accordingly. Your mind responds accordingly. It sees you doing what you do, and it draws its conclusions about who you are and what you will do on the basis of what it has seen you doing. So sales trainers like to say a new habit is 21 days. Do the same thing for do this new habit 21 days in a row, and on the 22nd day it's a brand new habit. The scientist mysticists will immediately set up experimental paradigms to prove that that's untrue, because the most important thing in the universe is garbage. If it's not garbage, it's shit. But either way, shit and garbage, that's all there really is. And if somebody makes any kind of an affirmative statement that might result in somebody having a better, happier life, then we immediately have to release a study that proves that that's shit and garbage, that it's only just shit and garbage. All that's going to happen is shit and garbage. Why bother? The universe is indifferent. You should be indifferent too. People who give advice like that, horsewhipped, tarred and feathered, at an absolute minimum, you should not listen to them. They are not worth listening to. Whatever it is they know in their real job, they don't know anything about how to manage a human life. You should not listen to them. They are massively in error. But what you are, where you are, who you are, how you see yourself is a result of the vector that you've been traveling until now, and the amount of time that you've been traveling it. So if you are the sweet little daughter of the scientist and he sends you off to my movie about the joy of chastity, and you suddenly realize that, my God, you're just about ready to give up the most precious thing that you own as an adolescent. You're just about ready to give it up to a total jackass, not even to an admirable, respectable, marriageable man, but to a jackass, to someone that you would never consider marrying. That whatever else this girl knows, she knows that this guy is a loser. And maybe what she likes about him is that he annoys her dad. I don't know, but she knows he's a loser. She knows she would never consider marrying him. And and she's considering soiling her memories forevermore. She will never have a second first time. And if her first time making love is with a jackass, with a moron, they'll treat her badly while they're together and treat her worse once they're apart. And who knows what trash he'll talk about her behind her back, and who knows what ugly things will happen as a result of this unfortunate affiliation. If Dad manages to talk her out of this, and my movie manages to put the fear of God in her and she gets back on the straight and narrow, then she's going to be a good woman, good wife, good mother someday. She's going to do a great job. But if he doesn't push her off that course, what happens? Time and a vector, we know what happens. That's why it's absurd to argue with the idea that your habituated emotions will show up on your face. Why it's absurd to even quibble about it, because it's obvious. It is obvious that the woman that you see, the 45 or 55-year-old barfly that you see, chain-smoking cigarettes and throwing back short beers, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you stopped into a bar to get directions, and there she is. Maybe she's the only person in that bar at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. How did she get there? What was she like when she was 16? So where you are going to is where you have pointed yourself. And if you look at where you have pointed yourself and you don't like where it ends up, you need to change that vector. You need to change your vector. You need to turn around. But the good news is, when you change your habits of mind and you change your habits of action, when you change those habits, when you change that behavior, in due course you will change your life. You will change the way you see your life. You will change your self-image. And it won't be 21 days, but let me tell you something. If on the 22nd day you did it, it's a habit. Do it on the 22nd day. Do it on the 23rd day. Do it on the day that you don't remember what day it is. Do it when it's 17 days in a row that you couldn't remember, since you couldn't remember how many days it is. Do it until you're not counting days anymore. Just do it. Just do it every day. Just do it, and it becomes a habit. And 12 months, 15 months, 18 months, 2 years, I don't know. There is a time when you will look at yourself and you will see your new self. You won't see your old self. And it doesn't mean that that will be gone. It will never be gone. But what you will be seeing now, what you will be anticipating seeing in the future, will be the person that you are now, not the person that you were 18 months ago. And on this new vector, you will move toward your new objective over time. And the time that you spent moving the wrong way will have been lost, but the time that you're spending now is all one. You are moving toward the win. You stopped losing, and you're moving toward the win. And the longer you do that, the better your life will get. Just by changing your habits of mind. But your past is still there. Your past is still what it is. And so I want to talk to you about the joy of redemption. There's the religious idea of redemption. The Christian idea of redemption is that Jesus will redeem your sins after you die. You will have a perfect afterlife that will endure indefinitely. You will live forever in peace and harmony in the arms of Jesus. I don't believe any of that. I have no reason to believe that. I have no evidence for that. This is where I can side with the chemist, if not the social scientist, as if you can't present any evidence for an argument, I don't hold it. This is the principle of parsimony. And the principle of parsimony is strictly a rule of thumb. You can't say that it's absolutely the case that not inventing an entity not in evidence is a poor idea, that there can never be a circumstance where you might need to invent an entity that's not immediately in evidence. I don't know. I don't care. My attitude is exactly the opposite. That if you have no reason, no evidence, nothing for me to hang my hat on, I'm not talking about it at all. It's not that I consider it proved or disproved. I consider it irrelevant. It is not something that I'm willing to talk about because there's nothing to be talked about. And this is the beauty of the principle of parsimony, is that it may or may not lead you to truth, but it definitely will save you time. But I can offer a better secular argument for redemption anyway, that redemption is the conscious choice to do better in the midst of chaotic life. That life is careening all around you. Life is this cacophony of chaos that is always hammering in on your brain from six directions at once. It's easy to do the wrong thing, especially if no one can see it anyway, especially if it's introspective. But doing the wrong thing will damage your life. We've discussed that. Making the inadmirable choice will leave you with regrets. Making the wrong choice will damage your life now and forevermore. It will put permanent, ineradicable stains in your memory. And therefore you cannot do that. You simply cannot do that. That chastity may consist of making a virtue of necessity. If there's no one who's knocking down your door to offer you frictionless sex in the first place, then refusing it is easy to do. It's easy to make a virtue of necessity, but my argument would be that because yourself is the highest value in your life, yourself is the cardinal value in your life, and because self-adoration is the cardinal virtue in your life, that you have to make a necessity of virtue. That virtue is not some kind of optional conduct. Virtue is really your only choice. It's the only choice that can move you toward greater splendor in your life, can move you toward greater happiness, greater health, greater wealth, greater prosperity, greater admiration for your achievements, better love with your spouse, better family life with your children, a better work life, a better social life, a better life. All that comes about as a result of making the admirable choice. And the more often you make the admirable choice, the better your life will be. The more often you make the inadmirable choice, the worse your life will be. Eventually, if you choose inadmirably enough, and especially consequentially enough, your life will be squalid. Your life will be more pathetic than that 55-year-old barmaid all alone in a tap room at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Your life will be more pathetic. Your life is pathetic. So, as a path to redemption, avoid regret. Never act in knowing error. You never act in knowing error. You always make the admirable choice. If you find that you've acted in error, it should be because you made a mistake, an error of knowledge, not because you chose to act in a venal or vicious way. You never act in knowing error. When you discover that you have made an error unintentionally, when you created a harm either to yourself or other people unintentionally, you need to correct it as much as you can. As soon as you discover the error, you need to correct it as much as you can. And there will be things that you cannot correct, but you need to correct as much as you can. And then the third thing would be, do not repeat that error. You made an error of knowledge. It wasn't intentional. It wasn't a venal, vicious error. But you did make an error of knowledge, and you need to learn better so that you don't duplicate that error. The trouble is that past cannot be erased. We're talking about what you can do now and in the future to choose admirably and to choose in such a way that you don't have to regret your choices, but you have choices in your past that you regret. I'm not telling you anything that's not factually true, but if you're denying it either in whole or in part, you got a real hard way to go, because until you acknowledge that the intentional errors that you made in the past had unhappy consequences, both for yourself and for other people, until you acknowledge that you have deliberately acted to your own injury in the past, you can't reconcile yourself to that error. That if you've done something wrong in the past, deliberately, I mean deliberately or unintentionally, either way, you still need to fix it. You need to fix what you can of it. You need to amend for it in any way that you can, even if that's only consists of expressing your remorse, expressing your apology. You need to do that. But if you are unwilling to admit that you have acted in self-destruction, you can't do it. You can't reconcile yourself to the past evils that you've done, and therefore you can't redeem them. Redemption is egoism in action. And egoism in action in this sense means admitting your errors and putting them right to every extent that you can, putting them right and doing better going forward, always looking to do better going forward. Redemption is egoism in action. But this is a secular path to redemption. I can't forgive your sins because the past can't be erased, and I can't promise you an eternal afterlife because I don't believe there is such a thing. But what I can do is I can show you how to amend for as much as possible the mistakes that you've made in the past, and therefore minimize the pain that you feel in the present and that you will feel in the future as a consequence of the harm that you cause to yourself and other people. You can reconcile yourself to this. You can redeem these errors. You can ameliorate this pain. You can make it better. You can't make it go away. It will never go away. But you can make it better by being right now, even though you have been wrong in the past. I call this ripping off the Band-Aid, and if you look in the Self-Adoration YouTube channel, just go back a year and a half, you'll find me making a movie strictly on the subject of ripping off the Band-Aid. I think it's a very, very good movie. It's a very therapeutic movie, and it's not the kind of thing I normally talk about. So you may wish to avail yourself of it. But the important thing to understand in what I'm talking about is that we are talking about moral philosophy in the way that no one has ever talked to you about it before. That moral philosophy was always something that's out there. It's out there somewhere. It's what I do to other people, but even more importantly than that, it's what other people shouldn't do to me. That's what moral philosophy is. Moral philosophy doesn't have anything to do with what I do. Moral philosophy is what you do. That's all it is. And if you learn to think about moral philosophy my way, you will actually have a moral philosophy this time in your life. Because you will be acting appropriately upon the human animal, on the uniquely human life. You will be responding appropriately because this is the way that we actually work from the inside out. It's a church. It's a televangelical mission. It's a personal ministry that comes right to your home every Sunday. No extra charge or obligation. So I'm passing the offering plate. I want you to pitch into this ministry. I want to make it grow. I want to make it bigger. I want to talk to your neighbors. I want to talk to your neighbors' daughters. Talk to them about chastity, masturbation, self-adoration, and splendor. But I need your financial participation to do that, so I would be deeply grateful if you would go to selfadoration.com, look for a link called I Don't Go to Your Church, and click on the PayPal buttons and contribute to this ministry. We're going to save the world. We are going to save the world one mind at a time. And the mind I'm working on right now is yours. But there are 7 billion others that I'd really like to attend to if I can get the resources to get at it. So this is your opportunity to participate in this mission. If you want to participate in a more active way, I'm absolutely interested. But if you just want to write a check, make a credit card contribution, please do. Thank you. I'd like to finish with a little memoriam for my friend Andy Zorn. Took his own life on March the 1st. There's a lot I could say about young men and the disposability of young men. Kind of burdens that we expect our young men to bear without really noticing them, loaded them up. So much. But what I really want to do is remember Andy, because he was a great young man. He was a good young man. He was very resolute, very determined, very strong. young man. I really admired him, and I'm really grateful for the time that we got to spend with him. And I don't want to take anything away from him. He did what he chose to do, and I don't want to take the choice away from him. It was too important to him. And so I just want to remember him, and I want you to think a little bit about young men that you may know casually. You could use a look in on you from time to time. This is where I let Andy down, is that I didn't look in on him. I should have. And in the meantime, I would tell you that what you need to do is look out for your own. Whatever shoulds people throw at you, and people are always throwing shoulds at you, it's why they're making these scoffing, sneering arguments, because first they want to scoff at you, then they want to sneer at you, and then they want to shame you into doing what they think you should do instead of what you should do according to your own hierarchy of values. But your own life, your spouse, your children, your parents, your brothers and sisters and their spouses and children, your friends, your career, your home. You have a hierarchy of values, and where your efforts should go is in support of that hierarchy of values. You should be looking out for your own. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. In the meantime, choose admirably. Love yourself. Thrive. Bless you. Thank you so much for your time, for your attention. Take care now.